Happy Tuesday. Hopefully the video will catch up to us real soon, catch up to the voice. Good afternoon, everyone. Nathan Ivey with you. Welcome back to Hot Mic Cincy, humble host and moderator. Got our regular crew here. We're scheduled to be joined by Laketa Cole, and we'll catch up with her along the way. Let me say hello to everybody. Tarris, how you doing, sir? Good to see you.
Doing well. Glad to be here. Humbly glad to be here.
Phil, no interruption. We'll go straight to Phil. How you doing, Phil?
You can't hear us?
He can't hear us. Kevin, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. Hello to everybody in the chat. Good to be here.
And good to be seen by everybody. Got a couple of people in the chat so far, and I'm not sure. Something's happening with Phil's system. He was with us. Well, he wasn't with us, and he was with us, and now it seems like his audio has gone out again. Hopefully it'll catch up here in a second, and we can just get straight back to it. But I see Christian's in the house. Christian Horton, got family in the house. He says, good evening, crew. More like good afternoon, but I appreciate the salutations no matter what. Pamela writes, good afternoon, Nathan, Kevin, and guest panelists. You mean the crew? Absolutely. Hey, good to see you, Pamela. Regina writes, good afternoon, everyone. Hey, good to see you. Something is definitely happening because it's taking a second for the chat box to catch up on the side there, but just give it a minute, and I'm sure it'll all be good. Good to see everybody. Hey, listen, as we're getting started and also waiting for Phil's system to catch up.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
Oh, there he is. There he is.
Hey, look. If you guys want to cut me out of this, just tell me up front. Okay.
Oh, absolutely not.
Don't pretend it's based on some technical, issue or something. Come on.
Oh, absolutely not.
You guys know I have a very fragile ego, so just be a little more understanding if you don't mind.
Listen, it's all good with me, bro. No problem. Glad you can hear us. You was just testing me, right?
All right, I'll forgive it. Okay, all right, I'll let it slide.
Shahira writes, "Good afternoon, everyone. Sad day losing the icon, Reverend Jesse Jackson. Yeah, I read that this morning. Very sad. Icon for sure." Most deaf. Nat writes, good afternoon, Nate and crew. David writes, good afternoon, everyone. Hey, good to see you, David and Nat. Take a second, please, like, and in particular, share this. That's how people see it. You know how the algorithm works. You don't share it, people don't see it. It's just that simple. But thank you for being here. And again, still waiting for Laketa Cole. Maybe she sent a message. I'm not sure. It could be technical stuff, or she's just busy. I get it. So we'll catch up with her when we can. Let's jump straight into our first topic. I've got a graphic I want to show you here. And this might get some people upset. Cincinnati City Council is considering immigrant protections against ICE. And I've got so many questions. Looks like the newest member of City Council, Ryan James, who is an African-American, I believe he's the youngest black man ever to be elected to Cincinnati City Council. He's introduced a motion that, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, guys, I believe is going to come up before council next week. It's called "To Protect Our Residents from the Threat of Immigration and Customs Surveillance." That's a lot. To protect our residents from the threat of immigration and customs surveillance. And it would direct the city administration to not ask residents about their citizenship for any city program. They're also going to be debating today as to whether they should spend about $200,000 to $300,000 to help immigrants facing deportation and their families, and also possibly provide social services for the immigration community. Now, the Department of Homeland Security responded, among other things, they said that they view the spending proposals as, quote unquote, a slap in the face. They say that money should be spent for the people who are living in poverty here in the city of Cincinnati. But what do you say? Let's get straight to the questions here. Does providing, let me bring this graphic down so we can break it down. Does providing legal support strengthen communities or deepen, for immigrants, strengthen communities or deepen political division? What do you think?
I think it probably deepens the political divisions. I mean, look, here's the reality. I think it's one thing to say, hey, we're not going to ask people about their citizenship. And I think it's another thing to take taxpayer dollars that legal citizens of Cincinnati are putting in their city to strengthen that and using people whose legality in this country is questionable. I'm not a fan of, Trump's mass deportation policy, but I do think some people might have a point about how their tax dollars are being spent. And I think this is one of the things that does have a tendency to get Democrats into some degree of trouble. And I get, people who have compassion for undocumented people who are here will say absolutely they might be in favor of this. But I think if you're just looking at it objectively, you're essentially talking about taking dollars that taxpayers are putting in. And I get, I'm not sure how much of their own tax dollars these undocumented folks are putting into the city coffers. So there might be some who might make that argument. Well, like, yeah, they're working and they're paying taxes, so some of that is their tax dollars as well. I can see that. I can see that part of the argument. But I think the question is, does it strengthen communities or deepen political divisions? I think for all of the reasons that I just laid out, I think it only deepens the political divisions rather than strengthens the communities.
It's refreshing to hear that sentiment, honestly, because I didn't think that you guys would have that. I figured you guys were going to go strictly to the far left. I really did. So I'm happy to hear that my colleagues on the panel are more center left thinking than far left thinking. As you will see that I'm more center right thinking than far right thinking. So I agree with Kevin. It would only divide the community, or a political divide the community, because as soon as the money goes to the immigrants, the illegal immigrants, that's going to give MAGA the opportunity to go run with it. See, I told you we're spending money, your taxpayer money, on people who shouldn't even been here to this community, and they'll give them something to run with. The first part of this that you asked about, the Ryan, the guy who's introducing the motion, as a new city councilman, I believe. I mean, I don't know what he's doing. I mean, that seems a bit of a reach. That seems a bit of a political grandstand. He's a new politician on the team, and he wants to put a stance out there where he stands. So he's going to present this motion. But getting money that are taxpayers' money is exactly what we've talked about several times on this programming, and why I believe that the Democratic Party lost the election. When we started talking about immigration, Democrats didn't want to hear it. And then we were saying, hey, well, it's taking away resources from Chicago and these places. And now that it's hitting in Cincinnati, I mean, I'm interested to see how you guys will handle it when it's at your back door, when the immigrants are going to start taking money that should go to after school programs, programs to keep violence, you name the programs. We're going to start taking that focus and putting it on, should this person who came to this country illegally get help getting deported or stay. I mean, that's just, I don't think that I think it will, to answer the question, it will deeply divide, politically divide locally more than support the strength of the community.
What's your take, Phil?
Tarris, when you're talking about center right, what about center wrong? All right. But anyway, I think that there's been a terrible bait and switch on this whole deportation thing. It just breaks my heart when they're going after people who've committed no crimes, after selling the thing because, we're going after the worst of the worst. And now they're just they want to meet their quota of whatever it is, 3,000 a day. And they're just grabbing all these people, many of whom have families here, have jobs. I know it's legal, but it's immoral, in my opinion. Now, I can't tell really whether this guy who put this thing forward is doing it just to get a name for himself, which I'm sure he is, or whether there's actually something in there that would actually protect people. So I just don't know the answer. If I was on city council, I'd be sitting down with the city solicitor and kind of asking realistically, is this going to do anything?
Well, here's another piece that was reported by the Inquirer. It would spend $300,000 if this motion, if it passed, to establish an emergency immigration response fund that would go toward legal assistance, food and housing support, and education programs for immigrants and their families. Anna Ivey says she's behind it as well. Looks like they've got some support on council behind this. So
I'm sure they do. It's an all Democratic council. I mean, this is a political issue that unless you have, a handful of members on council, and we've seen Scotty Johnson and Jan Michelle and some others on a couple of opportunities, go against the flow of what is, normally a very liberal Cincinnati City Council. So it's not a surprise that Ivey or some of the others would co-sign on this. I mean, here's the thing. They're asking people in this city for a lot of money. They're asking money for more police, more money for more law enforcement. They want to increase the income tax. And you've got long struggling communities in this city and neighborhoods in this city that can't get a dime from this city hall or even past city halls. And you want these people who are going to be extra taxed and who are missing out on tax dollars to not have a problem with the city taking $200,000 and $300,000 to, again, you can think it's immoral or whatever, but it is. I mean, these people are in the country against the law. And so what you're saying is that you're going to take those tax dollars instead of putting them in the neighborhoods that can use them and jacking up people's taxes or paying for law enforcement to deal with crime to handle this. I just don't know that is necessarily a smart use of city dollars. And it's a use of city dollars that is going to be more controversial, I think, than it is uniting in Cincinnati. And I think when you've had different groups who have long suffered in this city, who can't get money from City Hall, and you want them to swallow this on top of a tax increase, those are the types of sales that I think divide communities. And so this is a delicate game, that City Council is playing here. And then on top of that, doing this too draws more of a bullseye on Cincinnati, I think, from Donald Trump and ICE, because you heard how the Department of Homeland Security, if you don't want ICE in Cincinnati, moves like this don't do anything to keep you out of their crosshairs.
That's why I believe it's more of a, if it is a political grandstand, it's a not well thought out one in this particular situation that we have now, with ICE being bored because of they don't have anything to do, because most of the immigrants have self-deported. So like someone might have spoke earlier, they might, I don't know if they have quotas or not, but they are one of the largest outfits, I don't know what to call them, organizations in the law enforcement organizations in the nation. So they have work to do. So if you're saying, hey, I'm teeter-tottering, and Trump, for whatever reason this guy's doing this, and to talk to a base, to got to energize the thought of anti-immigration or ICE protesting or any of that kind of stuff. I don't know if it's an act blue move, that this guy, is he getting his calls from up high? Since they backed him, you got to act blue. You got to return this. This is what we're asking you to do to move up in political favors. But I think it's a bad move, because so you want now you're going to get you ask for it, you get it. You know what I mean? You want ICE around here, keep doing stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's a fair. I mean, what you're saying about like attracting disfavor with the White House, I don't think that is an unfair assessment. I'm just not convinced that it should matter that much. It's like, what's the right thing to do here? As I read over the article, they're talking about legal assistance, and that's like, to me, making sure that people understand what their rights are. Food and housing support. I'll say it again, whether they are U.S. born citizens or undocumented folks or people who are somewhere in that pipeline, there is nobody in this city, whether you live in the suburbs or you don't have a home, that benefits from having hungry children, desperate moms and dads with hungry children they can't feed. Nobody benefits from that. And then education programs. I hear all these people always talking about speak the language. Well, I mean, you learn English in schools, in education programs. I just looking at it that way, I don't see how any of that is wrong. And then I hear the tax argument, but we don't know what the number of taxes every single year that people who are non-citizens but live in Cincinnati contribute. These people pay taxes. They pay sale taxes. They support local businesses. They buy gas. They buy groceries. They buy all the things that small businesses need to keep the lights on. So is removing that in our best interest? I don't think that people have really thought that all the way through. It feels like, to Phil's point, it feels like pitting people against one another. I think there's enough money to go around. And Kevin, what groups in Cincinnati aren't able to get money? Is that a real thing? It sounds good.
I mean, I think it's a real thing to a lot of Black people who in neighborhoods who feel like their neighborhoods have been disinvested in. I mean, we talk about this all the time about, this is an ongoing narrative. I mean, that even people who've run for city council and have got elected to have run on campaigns of neighborhoods in Cincinnati, certain neighborhoods in Cincinnati not seeing investment. I mean, or being displaced by new investment and being sent someplace else. So I think, yeah, absolutely, that's a real thing. Is
it fair to say, and I've heard that before, I've made those arguments, but is it fair to say that those frustrations were alive way before immigrants became public enemy number one? Like, I've been hearing people talk about that.
But I think it's the argument that Black people make continually, is that whatever is the political flavor of the month, whether that's LGBTQ issues, whether it's immigration issues, is Black folks always get pushed to the back of the line in favor of these flavor of the month issues that come up. So you're right. Black people have been screaming this for years. So why is it that now all of a sudden that ICE and Trump show up, that now we're looking at social services, legal assistance for immigrants, when a lot of Black people in a lot of Black neighborhoods have been crying for that kind of outreach from City Hall for years, but we're told to kind of shut up and suck it up. And so I do think there is a political flavor of the month thing that happens with Democrats. And it generally is the case that Black people are always told to get in line. And there are groups that have moved in, that have moved in front. And that was one of the criticisms that a lot of Black people had about Obama, that he spent a lot of his political capital on LGBTQ issues and not enough on Black folks. I mean, you don't have to agree with it. I'm just saying that was part of the conversation. Yeah, even when you had the Black president. So yeah, I'm just saying that is a real sense that some Black people have, and that I've heard expressed on this podcast, on The Buzz and other places where people have brought this up. So it's not something that I'm just making up out of whole cloth.
No, I'm not saying you are. And I'll say it again, a lot of good people can be wrong in a lot of different places. My point is, and what I was trying to get at is, that has less to do with the so-called flavor of the month and more to do with long-standing frustrations that Black people or African Americans are having. It doesn't matter whether it's immigrants today or something else tomorrow or whatever it was 20 years ago. That's a whole separate issue. And I think that the powers that be are trying to pit Black and brown against one another. That was the point I was saying. Like, I've heard Black people talk about this. I hear less of it these days, but I've heard Black people talk about that in Cincinnati all of my life. So your frustrations, Black Cincinnatians, predate the new flavor of the month. It ain't their problem. It ain't the immigrants. And I don't like the whole, let me push back on flavor of the month. I think that there's a community out here, brown communities, that are in real crisis. And I think that that's what politics should do, right? It should respond to issues even whenever they come up, right?
Can I bring up an interesting point? Okay,
I'm just offering pushback for the conversation. Jump right on in. Yeah.
So let's take Iris Rowley, and they go over with a fine-tooth comb how much money she receives, and her programs proven to be effective.
Who goes over with a fine-tooth comb?
Phil.
There you go. There you go.
Okay, but what do you mean they? I mean, I don't know. You make it like she's being treated differently from
the
anybody else.
The Heimlich types. The Heimlich types.
Now, now you're really insulting these people.
It could be a compliment, too. It could be a compliment. You know, someone who's good at finances, someone who cares about their community and wants to know where the money is going there, right. Although it might not.
I'm with you.
So you take Iris Rowley and they're saying, there's too much money. They're giving her too much money because we don't have that much money to go around. But then they find this money that if you even take a fraction of that and give a little bit more to Iris Rowley, she'd be able to take care of the community who she serves with results to match it. So that's where I'm looking at it. I'm like, so why not invest or reinvest some of this money back into programs such as people like Iris Rowley and all those kind of people? I'm saying even more so than even finding money in the coffers for this outlayer for people who are here illegally. If we're trying to stop people who are legally born here from committing crimes and doing stuff and being bored and not having programming that so we can reduce crime so people will come down to our downtown area, then why would we
It has nothing to do with reducing crime. We're talking about people who have no criminal record that are at risk of being deported. It has nothing to do with crime.
Compared to black people who are born and raised here, who could use more programming money and have that energy toward people who were born right here on this soil, who are citizens of Cincinnati, not someone who came over here. Let's use the resources on the people who were born here, not the people who are coming here illegally.
Okay, what I'll give you an example. What about the so-called dreamers? There's a guy, you must have read this, Emerson Calandris. This is a guy who was a soccer star in high school here, okay? Never broke the law. He was brought here at the age of 5 from Honduras, which is one of the most dangerous places in the world, right after his graduation. They picked him up from, I forget what high school, some high school in the city, picked him up and deported him to Honduras, where has no memories of. That's not an issue about crime. That's just plain cruelty.
That's an off-layer issue. And Phil, I'm going to say this here on this programming. I personally have immigrant fatigue. I'm done. When are we going to start talking about Americans here? Immigrant fatigue. You know, like they talk about they got black fatigue and this kind of fatigue.
What, you mean you want them to stop deporting all these people?
I'm saying if ICE is one of the largest departments of justice departments of in law enforcement in this agency, and there's a lot. I'm saying 30% of these people on ICE are Latino Americans. They're Latin Americans. They're Hispanic. They employ their own to go after the people who didn't come here legally. So I'm saying I'm immigrant.
So what's your point?
I just made a point, and I'm going to come here live and say I'm immigrant fatigued. Let's start.
But when you say immigrant fatigued,
right here on this soil first.
When you say you're immigrant fatigued, are you saying you're tired of ICE deporting thousands of people haven't committed crimes, or are you saying or are you saying I'm tired of people griping about what ICE is doing? I think they should just go ahead and do it. Well, what do you mean by immigrant fatigued?
Fair question.
As an American, black American born in this soil, I think there should be more attention put on black Americans born on this soil.
You're not answering my question.
I'm trying to. What do I say about it? The first one I don't agree with what you're trying to put words and paraphrase for me. Immigrant fatigue. I'm tired of hearing about it. We've had an immigrant fatigue. Barack Obama, immigrant fatigue. Wes Moore.
They're deporting thousands of people. What do you mean you're tired of hearing about it?
I'm tired of immigrants speaking for people who look like me. I'm immigrant.
I have no idea what you're saying. I have
Kamala
no idea.
Harris. I'm immigrant fatigued. Kamala Harris, Barack Obama, these faces, these black faces that the Democrats are putting up, they're all immigrant. They're not.
Are you fatigued from
American
racism?
soil.
Let me get us back on track, because I don't think anything about what y'all talk about right now is advancing the intellectual side of this conversation. And I think
we're trying to get views. We don't care about intellectual.
Yeah, well, I think we should be trying to add something worthwhile to the conversation than just mindless debate.
Media.
We got enough of that. Here's the question that we should be asking on this, and I think this kind of gets to the heart of where the division might come in. Is there a scarcity of city dollars or not? And what I mean by that is if you believe that there's scarcity of city dollars, then it does become this group against that group and who's getting money. But it seems like every time you turn around, city council is coming up with some proposal to pull out $2 million or $500,000 for some program. Yet at the same time, they want to tell you how they're operating from a budget deficit and they need a tax increase and more tax dollars. So which is it? Do you need tax money, or do you suddenly got this slush fund somewhere where you're pulling out hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars for these proposals here or there? If we got the money, fine. But don't turn around next week and then start talking about, well, we ain't got money for this, or we need a tax increase to help pay for this, because then that's where I think people start getting into, that's where people start checking your pockets and saying, what are you spending money on? And is this money spent better someplace else? And this is where city council and the city needs to be honest with the taxpayers of Cincinnati. You can't tell us that there is scarcity of dollars and then pull a proposal out of thin air to give $300,000 over a politically divisive issue and not think that that's going to divide the community. Now, if we got plenty of tax dollars to go around and this ain't hurting anything, or it's not taken away from anything, any place else, then cool, say that. But city council is trying to send these joint messaging like, yeah, we got to run on bare bones and we ain't got no money. Well, where are you coming up with $200,000 or $300,000 for this from?
That's a real interesting and fair question. Yeah, I'm with you on that. But I think what needs to be, because when we started out, people were making an argument. Some of the crew members are making an argument like that, how are we spending tax dollars on undocumented people? And I'll go back to this. The last thing I read, and this wasn't just about Cincinnati, it was about the entire country, that undocumented people contributed over $90 billion per year in taxes, right? For services that in some cases they're not even eligible for. So the whole argument that you're spending U.S. tax dollars, they're contributing U.S. tax dollars. So that must be true for Cincinnati. I just don't know what that number is. Just because you're not a U.S. citizen does not mean that you're not paying taxes. They are contributing. So if city council decides to take $200,000 or $300,000 to contribute back to their well-being, they're paying for it just like all of us are.
Yeah, and I acknowledge that in my initial point. I said we don't know like how much of their tax dollars, how much or if any are going in, and that would be a legit argument that people could make. And I just want to respond to Kamikia's point about $200,000 to $300,000 being pocket change. $200,000 to $300,000 is not pocket change when you're a city that's going to taxpayers saying that you broke and you need an income tax increase. I get what you're saying in the grand scheme of a multi-million-dollar city government. $200,000 to $300,000 is not a lot, but that's like somebody coming up to you saying that, asking you to borrow money, saying that they broke, right? And then they turn around and go out and spend some money on a pair of Jordans. And you like, wait a minute, I just thought you told me you was broke. You was hitting me up for money. And now I see you going out, turning around buying Jordans. Either you got money or you don't. That's what I'm saying about city council. If you got the money, cool. But don't then turn around and go to say to taxpayers, hey, I'm going to need to borrow that on your earnings tax because we ain't got enough money to pay for this other stuff.
I just have to.
That's what I got.
I just got to make a quick clarification. It's not like a pair of Jordans. We're talking about vital services for people who, in a lot of people's viewpoint, are under assault, right? So this ain't
Nathan,
they're
don't
not
get
buying
caught up.
Jordans.
Don't get caught up in me using the Jordans as an example.
But you use it as an example.
My point is you're asking to borrow money.
Charged.
My point is you're asking to borrow money from people that you don't need.
Housing. That's not Jordans.
Yeah, Nathan, you're missing the point. Look, throw that out the window. My main point is it would be like having money that you could really spend on what you're asking for the money for, but you're borrowing it from people under false pretenses. That's my main point. Is if you got money, then use that money for that, but don't cry broke.
Why can't both those things be true? Why can't the city say, hey, listen, we want to expand our emergency services and we want to invest more into whatever you want to invest in. And at the same time, we want to help these brown folks who we feel like are under assault. How is that a contradiction?
It's absolutely a contradiction, because then I have the right to come back and say, well, you're asking me for more money for this money that you about to spend could be put toward that. And I think that that's more of a priority than how you're trying to spend the money on this. It's a priority thing, Nathan. You either got money to do everything or you got to make tough choices. That's where government is. That's what being a good steward over tax dollars is. You may not be able to do everything.
I think that's what they want us to believe. They want us to believe that there's limited, and that's
my point. You're making my point.
And I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's true or not. I think that the city, and again, I'm just talking, I don't have any numbers to support it, but I think the city can do multiple things. Like the city can support, people who might be under assault from federal investigation or ICE or whatever. And at the same time, the city can come to us and say, hey, listen, we need more money for the expansion of police and EMS services. I don't think that's a contradiction. I think that's just government.
I believe you're right. I think you're saying the same things, but often on this programming, we talk about, let's go back to my original point before it got moved off. Iris Rowley, we could say that we could take that money and give more programming to her, which her programmings are proven to be effective. And like you said, Nathan, you can possibly do two things at the same time. But why? And on this programming, we have people saying that she gets too much. So now we're going to find some money somewhere else, whenever we can argue and say, why not take that money that you're finding for somewhere else to put toward Iris Rowley and her programming that is working and is effectively working and proven to work. Instead, that's where we got off. And I shouldn't have said this, because every time I do this, it takes away from my points. That's whenever I said that's when we have the Phil Heimlich types that go over her books and try to say she gets too much money and she's doing, and takes away from that argument of the point. Oh, you're right, Phil. I agree with you, Nathan, that if the city, you've got the money, but don't try to say that you don't have the money and try to minimize the work that people in the streets are already doing for people who are citizens in this, born here first, American born here first. Then after that, you give the money to them.
Yeah, I don't think the city's ever done that before, that minimize what. I don't believe that's happening. Again, I feel like we're falling into this versus that. And I feel like that's the plot. They want us to argue amongst ourselves for table scraps while the real money goes somewhere else. I think the city can support this and support that and support that and support that.
I agree, Nathan. I don't disagree with you, but I'm saying that they present it. This is not anything that people. This is how they present it when they come every year. Hey, we're working at a budget deficit. We got to cut this program. We got to cut summer jobs for kids. We got to cut lifeguards at the recreation centers.
I haven't heard that for years.
I'm just going back, Nathan. I'm going back in the past historically, what has been happening.
But is that fair?
And I know every year we write these stories about the city making budget cuts every year to some programs or somebody who didn't get money because they're operating at a $2 or $3 or $10 million budget deficit or whatever it is. And they sell you on this notion of, hey, the budget is tight. Money is tight. We can't do everything that we used to do. right? We can't do all of this stuff. They're the ones that create this scarcity narrative every year when the budget comes out with the cutbacks. It's every year. It's every year. And this is why they're coming at you with this tax increase. We need more money so that we can get more cameras, more tech. And so when you present this scarcity narrative and the need for more tax dollars, but then you turn around and like, oh, there's this new program that we want to do, then people look at that and be like, well, I thought you just said y'all was broke. Y'all didn't have no, we said it when they came up with the $2 million after the brawl. Like, where is this $2 million? Where's this $2 to $5 million magically coming from? They was just saying they didn't have no money. And now there's some magical fund where $5 million is coming from for more police and more overtime than TG asked for. Where is this money coming from? Stop with the scarcity. That's all I'm saying, is stop with the scarcity narrative. If you got the money, fine. That's the only thing I'm saying. They create this division by trying to get, by painting this picture that the city doesn't have any money. They got to cut and they need more. And then suddenly they find this money out of thin air when it seems to be a political pet project that they like. And that's all I'm saying. That's what creates the division. And they do it all the time.
I hear you. I remain unconvinced though. But I hear you though. I hear you.
I'm not convinced either. I'm just saying this is what they do. I'm not convinced that it's scarcity either.
I'm not so sure that's what they do.
It's a narrative that's created at the federal, state, and local levels of government. It's a government thing where they always present this notion of there's not enough, right? It's how they continue to get to raise taxes and do the thing. They got to convince the public that what they got is not enough. So you're not questioning how they're spending the money.
So a response from the department, and again, I think this is a very fair question. Like, so is this move going to incur the wrath of the Trump administration and put Cincinnati in the crosshairs? It's been quoted that someone from Secretary Tricia McLaurin from the Department of Homeland Security, she's the assistant secretary, she slammed the proposal and said, quote, this is what's been attributed to her, "What a slap in the face to the 35% of Cincinnati children who live in poverty. Quote, those dollars should be going to their social safety net and helping those children. The American taxpayer offers those in this country illegally a $2,600 exit bonus and a free flight home." Does she have a point? Does she have a point?
I don't know that I followed that.
You didn't hear me all? I'll say
it again. I didn't catch all of it.
So here's a quote from the Department of Homeland Security Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaurin. She slammed the proposal that was proposed by members of City Council. Quote, at least a quote that's attributed to her, "What a slap in the face to the 35% of Cincinnati children who live in poverty. Quote, those dollars should be going to their social safety net and helping those children." Does she have a point?
Same thing I was saying. I mean, like why can't we help the people who are here first and foremost before we go extending a hand to people who have come over here for whatever pretenses, what it's asylum seekers or whatever they do. And I use it, said it on the last time. If I went to another country to try to do this, they wouldn't be like, come on in for open arms. They put Brittany and Grindr in prison for being over there for a weed vape pen. America has been taken advantage of, in my opinion. But I agree that what she said, that programming, that money could be spent for other programming.
Well, and I think it plays into the narrative that, conservatives have said, have talked about the drain that undocumented people put on communities. I mean, I guess the part that I didn't fully understand is like when they're talking about, like, I could even see like the percentage of funds that they were using to maybe kind of help people with legal aid or whatever if they're facing deportation. But where they lost me was on the social services piece. And that's where I was kind of like, that's a little shaky, because that gets into sort of like this 35% that, this Department of Homeland Security person is talking about, or what Tarris is talking about, because I'm like, well, what does someone's deportation status have to do with providing these other social service safety nets? Like, I mean, like you got black kids, it says white kids in Cincinnati who are hungry. Like, why is that? What does any of that have to do with one's deportation status and ICE? Like, it's that part of things that maybe go a step too far. Like, if you're saying, hey, we want to provide legal services to help people figure out what their status is, or if they can stay in the country or whatever, I can get with that. But then when you start to get into these other social service areas, I'm like, what does that have to do? What does that have to do with that? And why is that group any more special than anybody else in Cincinnati who's suffering from the same foodless situation, rent situation, or whatever? Shouldn't there be a pot of money for that, for like the entirety of the city? Like, why are you carving it out for undocumented persons? Like, I think that's the part that I didn't really get about the spending of this part. Like, why all of a sudden, because ICE is doing what they're doing, that socials. I'm not saying that it might not be legit. I just didn't understand that.
Hey, Laketa, can you hear us? Can you hear us, Laketa? I think she's still having some issues.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we may not be able to get her on today. Yeah, she's in and out. Hey, Phil, Iris has a question. She wants to know, if you're on city council, would you fund this proposal as you understand it?
I don't think that's what she's asking. She's asking when I was on council. She says,
what did he fund?
What did he fund? Well, a majority funds things. I mean, I can talk about the things that I kind of pushed and promoted, if you want. I mean, I pressed and I got more cops. We added police, which I kind of initiated. The cameras, I kind of initiated that. The Citizens on Patrol program, which became pretty successful. I'm trying to think what else. Regulations about sexually oriented businesses. I mean, these are things that, I kind of were things that I especially promoted. To say what did I fund? I mean, that's not real clear.
Yeah, I don't know how I read that so wrong. Yeah, you read it much better than I did. That's exactly what she was asking you. For me, it's like, I just wonder.
That's a good thing, Phil. He said when that comment, that last comment, that's a positive thing in the community. He's just saying.
I'm sorry, you talking about the one that the comment from Darren Chamberlain, that one up there?
That's a compliment. That's a compliment.
Tarris, you're saying that you kind of understand where they're coming from. At least that quote from McLaughlin saying that it's a slap in the face. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pro America first, and then especially pro. I mean, like, I've used the analogy when I first started off. I'd hate to go back to it again, but I would like to see that money go to programs, if not for Iris Rowley's programs like that have proven models, they talk about crime downtown. What can we do to prevent it? And then, like I said, we have people who are thinking that Iris Rowley gets too much when her methods are proven to be successful. So why are we coming up with different That's why I think it was I'm not sure if this Ryan guy, he's a new political guy. He's probably just on a political grandstand, putting a motion out there that is extremely sensitive right now and a time of midterms. So I don't know if this is coming down, down the ladder. I don't know. I'd like to see I'd like to see if he's a part of Act Blue before I even make any comment, because that was the first thing I'd be like, I want to go to his campaign website to see if he gets his campaign donations through Act Blue. If he does, then that makes a difference to how I see anybody who promotes anything, just like I would for somebody who gets money from Apex, or anybody on the right who gets money from the Tea Party, or I'm going to know where you stand by where you're getting your money from. So if he's a part of the Act Blue coalition, then hey, I can see why he's stoking the fire.
Or maybe he just genuinely feels like it's something. Again, I haven't spoken for him, can't speak for him. But maybe he feels like this is something that, local government should deal with. I guess what I was trying to get at with that question is, I remember you saying you was a big supporter of the so-called Big Beautiful Bill. Am I correct in that?
Absolutely.
Well, I thought you were a fiscal conservative. That Tarris, that added $4 trillion to the national debt. I thought we Republicans and conservatives believe in balanced budgets. Why would you support adding $4 trillion to the national debt?
Because I'm a mature person when I think about these things, and I think about them first and foremost, how it affects myself and my family. Myself,
how about your children, grandchildren?
Hold on. I was getting there, Phil, but you cut me off. How do these bills that are proposed in now in Congress affect me, myself, my wife, my kids, my family, my business? First and foremost, as a mature person who looks at these things and reads these bills. And with the big, beautiful bill, someone who's in my situation, someone who's self-employed, other people out here, black men, self-employed, who are trying to do things the right way with my family, I can go and I can show them parts in the big, beautiful bill that will help their families. They will help their families. So I'm not.
Let me ask you a question. Can I ask you a question?
Then I look at it on a communal level of how it's going to affect other people. But first and foremost, when I look at that bill, I'm going to find things that's going to be able to.
Can I ask you a question? Can I ask you, Tarris, a question? Tarris, let me ask you a question. If you were to take your credit card and go out and buy $10,000 or $20,000 worth of stuff that you don't have the money to repay, would that be good for your family?
Phil, I'm going to do something that you don't often do. I'm going to answer your question directly. No, it wouldn't be.
You said it wouldn't hurt your family.
You said, would it be good for my family? No, it would not be good for my family.
That's exactly what the government is doing with that big, beautiful bill and all the other stuff that's been passed other than really under Bill Clinton, just piling on the debt, just like your credit card.
And do you know what? You know what's more important to me, Phil? Like that's more important to you, like how that big, beautiful bill and how that affects you is more important to you about how the government is taking it and piling that debt on. How I can take this bill and find the good parts of it and see how it can positively affect my family and my business. And then I can positively affect people around me. I'm not going to pick it apart and be like, oh, this part right here is not good, so I'm going to not like the whole thing. I'm going to be a mature person about it, and I'm going to find the things that can affect me and my family, which I have, which I love. I love no tax on tips for people like me who operate on tips. That has saved a lot of people who are in the industry, the service industry like me. No tax on overtime.
Yeah, by borrowing and printing the money. That's how they're doing it.
Okay. So that part's important to you. But whenever my rebuttal on that is all the Somalian fraud that happened is $9 billion worth, if you want to start talking about any of that kind of responsibility and fiscal responsibility, look at these Democratic ran states like the fraud that happened with Scampon Timmy Walls. When you start talking about the big, beautiful bill and how it affects me. So you asked me a question, how it affects me? Hey, it affects me good. But the Scampon Timmy and what goes on in Minnesota and the big, beautiful bill, let's say that they offset each other. That fraud is more important to me than anything you could point out in the big, beautiful bill because they stole. This beautiful bill was passed through Congress, and it went through the right way it went through the right way, man. Come on. Yeah. It's not, you're talking about
what I was trying to get to real quick. So the reason, what struck to me was you had the Trump administration Homeland Security official. She made this point about how the money should be spent on poverty, but then the big, beautiful bill, which you support, cut SNAP benefits over the next 10 years by 20%. And you talked about, investing in programs that work. SNAP is a proven over many decades program that reduces poverty, primarily in children, a lot of black children, American citizens. So it just seemed like it was hypocritical to point your fingers. You're talking about let me finish the whole point. I'm about to land. It just seemed very hypocritical to try to use this issue to make a point about how Cincinnati should be spending its money on poverty. When the administration had an opportunity, they cut government programs, anti-poverty programs by 20%. So I'm like, practice what you preach. Like, if you feel that way, then you should be doing it on a federal level as well.
So you know what that is, Nathan, and this is how this type of move plays right into the right and how they're able to pass things like the big, beautiful bill and cut those types of benefits. Because what they will say, and this is what they have said and what they will continue to say, is look at what happens in Democratic cities like Cincinnati or Minnesota. They're taking your tax dollars and they're spending it on social services for people who shouldn't deserve it, who aren't citizens of this country. This is what they say. And in reality, that's exactly what this is. And I'm going to say this, I'm going to make this point, and it's going to be an unpopular point because you said it, Nathan. The essence of politics is hypocrisy. And you either believe that governments should follow the law or that they shouldn't follow the law. It's basically that simple. And you can't be mad at Trump and his administration when they don't adhere to the Constitution or follow the law. But then because, as Phil said, you see a law as immoral or unfair and you don't agree with it, that your side should not be bound to follow what's on the books. Here's the reality. We all know that immigration reform is something that should have been dealt with and passed in Congress a long time ago. Nobody is disputing that. But the laws that are on the books are the laws that are on the books. You can think they're immoral, you can think that they're not right, but they are the law. And if you disagree with an immoral law, and I know people will go back to the civil rights movement, and you know what, King and all of them, they went to jail, right? They believed so much in what they were doing that they knew some of the things that they were doing were breaking the law, but they were willing to go to jail, right, to get the country in a position where they went and changed those laws. So look, a lot of the things that the way we live in society now is because laws that were thought to be immoral, you went through the system and changed those laws. That is not what has happened with immigration.
Well, the civil rights people, they didn't go through the system. You just said they broke the law.
They did, but in the process of that led to congressional change, that led to constitutional amendments, the elimination of segregation laws, voting rights. Through their protest and breaking the law, it led to congressional change. That's what I'm saying. But the government didn't break the law, right? They still live by those Jim Crow segregation laws with the white lunch counters and what. They still got arrested and they still went to jail because that was the law. But King them fought against the immoral law to the point where it got changed. So what you have to ask yourself is, and this is the philosophical question, are you okay with your local government not following the law? And if you're okay with that, then you can't also be hypocritical and get bent out of shape when the Trump administration bends the rules. It's either you follow the law or you don't follow the law.
What local government isn't following the law, Kevin?
Well, for one, you're giving money to undocumented people.
That's not illegal.
Well, okay. Well, let's just say you're harboring then. You're knowingly harboring and giving aid and comfort to people who are in the country illegally.
That's not illegal either.
What are you talking about?
It's not illegal to.
So Nathan, okay. I'm not going to even draw that comparison because I already know where
it is not illegal to provide food and assistance to people who are undocumented. So when you were making your point, I'm like, what local community is doing anything illegal? The city of Cincinnati is not doing anything illegal with this proposal.
But to write it into law is like, I think that when he takes it to a step further, when this city councilman writes it into law and brings it a motion in front of the city council and says, I want to bring this, and that is taking it. It's not against the law or anything, but it's putting a stance. That's like whenever we do resolutions in our city council, like if we agree with the bill that's going to for the House or the Senate, because we watch the legislative board in Kentucky, because we want to know what's going to affect our city, as small as it might be. So when we see something that draws our alarm, we write resolutions and we bring those resolutions to our council and we say, hey, we agree with this bill or we don't agree with this bill. What this guy's doing, in my opinion, it's a litmus test. That's why I want to know who he's speaking, who's backing him, or is this a one-off thing? Because this is a test. He's putting this out there on public record and saying, hey, I know we're not a sanctuary city, and I know that DeWine's going to give us some federal money and blah, 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 but will this work? Will this work? And then when he's getting a little attention from it, and then ICE has already come. It's a division. I think this is like a division thing. It's a division play.
I thought this was a Christian nation. I hate to take it here, but I thought this was a Christian nation. I thought Christians wanted to be Christ-like. What would Christ do? Now, I'm no expert. Kevin, you'll be much more expert than I am. But something tells me that Christ would give undocumented people food and let the chips fall where they may.
So here's my
because your ultimate judge is in heaven, not in this world.
Here's the thing, Nathan.
That's the
I can answer your question for you, Nathan, if I may, even though I'm not a pastor. May I answer it?
Sure.
Okay.
I did a
little study in the Bible for one of my commentaries about essentially illegal immigrants, and what the Bible calls them is aliens. Okay, that's the term. But do you know throughout the Bible, especially in the Proverbs and throughout the Bible, we are told to welcome the foreigner. Welcome the foreigner. Okay, so the point being, and I guess I'm agreeing with you, is any of those you folks, whether on this podcast or in government or Washington, whatever, if you're supporting this thing about going after thousands of these people that have families and jobs, you support that, that's fine. But please don't tell me that you go to church on Sunday and you follow the Bible, because I can tell you right now, taking and deporting thousands of these people, it's totally contrary to the scripture.
Let me just say this. If we're talking about, and here's what I think people have a difficult time separating. Like what you do as an individual and what you believe in from a faith perspective, that's you. It's like the Bible said, as for me and my house, I will follow the Lord. That's very different than saying what the government should be. Yeah, they call America a Christian nation and people fall into that. But there's a reason why there's a separation between church and state in how we run government, because government is not a theocracy. Everybody in this country doesn't believe what Christians believe. Muslims don't believe it. Jews don't believe it. Atheists and agnostics don't believe it. So what you're saying then is that because I follow Jesus, everybody in America ought to do what I believe Jesus would say do. And you can't run government that way. You can run your life that way. You can run your church that way, but you can't run a nation that way.
Okay, let me ask you, Kevin, you'd agree with me that there is a pretty extensive principle about welcoming foreigners in the Bible. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Okay. So just to I understand what you're saying. What you're saying is that only applies to individuals. It doesn't apply to government.
It shouldn't apply to. I'm not saying it shouldn't apply to the government because as a Christian, let me finish my point. I'm not saying it shouldn't apply to the government as a Christian because I believe that. But I also understand the nation that we have and the way that it was founded. They did not want religion running the country because of the danger of it. You saw what happened with the Spanish Inquisition. Look, religion has been used throughout history to subjugate, discriminate, and even kill people. It's largely what a lot of the things that you're seeing over in the Middle East are going on. Like a lot of that is based in theology and religious conviction, not politics. So religion taken to the extreme, you don't want you. I mean, it's very difficult to run a government.
So here's my question. If you're voting for somebody in Congress or something, here's my question. Whether or not it's in the Bible or not, do you support the government having a more welcoming attitude toward foreigners? I'm not talking about people with criminal records. In terms of policy, what do you think the right policy is?
Yeah, Phil, but when you think about the way that things are set up, and I will agree with this, you just can't, just like you can't let everybody in your house because you don't know what people's intentions are. The country is the same way. There are national security interests that are in play as to why we have rules about how people can come into the country. Now, if you're a refugee, if you're fleeing, I mean, all of these things are already kind of in immigration law. Like there's a system that you go through if you're fleeing.
The Trump administration has pretty much wiped out all refugee programs. The only one left is
those were things
from South Africa.
Those are things that were on the book.
Let me say this: the whole thing I hear from people, I just want them to. I want immigrants. I just want them to come in legally. Well, unfortunately, the Trump administration has pretty much eliminated any opportunity to come in legally, other than those white guys from South Africa.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this, you know, the way that things were going and the way that things were happening, you cannot say that it did not create an environment for Trump to be able to come in and resonate with a lot of people. So sort of this notion of open borders is not what most Americans want. You might not like hearing that, and a lot of people listening to this podcast might not like hearing it. But the fact of the reality is that most Americans would agree they don't want open borders. That doesn't mean that we aren't welcoming, that we aren't sensitive to people who are fleeing disaster or asylum. But you don't just want the door wide open for people.
I'm not saying door wide open. I'm not saying that.
Okay,
I'm just
now
what I'm talking about. The current
but you can't deny there are a lot of people that are in this country right now who came through the door wide open. They weren't fleeing asylum. They didn't have temporary protective status. That there are a group of people who are, I don't know how many, I'm not going to try to assign any number, but there are people who are living in this country who came in through a wide open door and they didn't go the right way. And you're never going to convince me that for national security reasons that should be okay. I'm okay if you come through the right way.
But that's a hypothetical in which you've offered no evidence. You just said you don't know how many. Well, if you don't know how many, then how do we know whether
Come on, Nathan, you're not going to, no, seriously, Nathan, you're being disingenuous in the argument. You're not going to act like you're going to sit here and say that we ain't got nobody in this country that didn't come in without going through the right process. Come on,
no,
bro.
What I'm doing. What I'm saying is,
any credibility you got, you shoot yourself in the foot if that's the position you're going to take.
Well, you're not. I tried to cut it some slack. You are not in charge of my credibility.
I don't know what the number is, but I'm not fool enough to say that people.
Well, if you don't know what the number is,
if
you don't. But here's the point I'm trying to get to. If you don't know what the number is, why are you fear mongering about the number of people who are here?
I'm not for the fear mongering. I guess my overall.
But you just did.
No, I'm not.
You just did. You just said that there was an open door policy. I don't know what the number is.
No, I did not say that. I said that those on the right.
Can I finish my point?
Those on the right said that, and most Americans don't want open borders. I didn't say that there was.
You did. You said there's an open door policy, and that most Americans would agree that we don't want. That's exactly what you said, almost verbatim. You said that. And you said most Americans would agree that we don't want an open door policy.
That's what I said. That's what I said. I said most Americans would agree. I didn't say that that's what you said. I said most Americans would agree that's what they don't want. I'm very good at remembering my own words, Nathan, so you ain't going to cross me up.
You're not the only person with a memory. I'm not trying to cross you up. I'm just reiterating what you just said.
Yeah, well, say what I said. Because I'm going to stand 10 toes down on that. I'm not going to let you misrepresent.
You can stand 25 toes down on it. So here's what I'm saying. Then you said to me that you're not going to let me say that there aren't people here in this country who just came across. All I asked is, if we don't really know what the number is, it could be a very small number. The number could be so small that it doesn't warrant people being made afraid about it and all the millions and billions of dollars that we see in terms of federal dollars being dedicated to it. There's a big difference from you come to me saying, oh, there might be 10,000 people in the country who we don't know who we're here. We don't know where they came from. And you saying there's 10 million. That's a huge difference.
I never said there were 10 million people.
I know you didn't, but you never gave a number. And when you don't give a number, it leaves the listener to just conjure up the worst case scenario.
Well, that ain't on me. That ain't on. How is that on me?
That's what you just did, though.
How is what people conjure up in their own mind on me?
That's what you just did, though. You just conjured
up. Get a hold of your imagination.
No,
I'm not going to be responsible for people's overactive.
You got to be responsible for what you say, sir.
I think that's a
you
lot.
You have to be responsible for what you say, sir, and that's what you just said. That's why I asked you,
Nathan. I'm responsible for what I say, but I'm not responsible for your imagination, bro. I'm not going to take responsibility.
Absolutely,
for your
but you have to be responsible for the things that come out of your mouth. And on one hand, you're saying
I stand 10 toes down on everything that I said.
You can stand 1,000 toes down on it.
Bro. If you want to turn the United States into Candyland, that ain't on me.
Right.
Hey, like Rodney King said, why can't we all just get along?
What I'm trying to get to is, I don't really believe it's as big as a problem as they trying to make it out to be. Because nobody's ever given me any numbers. You can't on one hand tell me this is a huge problem, and then when I ask you, well, How many people came over? Well, I don't know. Then what are you working on? If you can't tell me even a range, then what are you saying then? And why are you saying it? We don't know. I don't think we ever had an open door policy. I know that that's a political term that was very effective, used by the Republicans. They used it very effectively, but I don't know if that's the most accurate way of describing what happens on our border. I don't think that's an accurate way to describe what was happening at the border. Now, I do know that there were some huge problems. Now, say it again. The problem was never the border. That's not what the problem is. The problem was in Washington, D.C., where Democrats and Republicans never came together to pass comprehensive immigration reform. Now, the Biden administration tried. That was the first legislation they came up with when Biden got in office. But the Republicans shot it down. So I think we should be careful about the language that they're using, because it kind of pushes people into a direction in which there's no real evidence of it whatsoever. I hear people saying millions of people came over. Really? Give me the numbers. Well, we don't really know. Well, how you can't have it two ways. You can't say you don't know who's here, but then when I ask you how many people came over, you don't know. It can't. Which is it? Either you know the number of people came over, or you don't.
Nathan, the next time you bring up a point on something and you ain't got some numbers, I just want you to remember this point that you just making about if you ain't got the numbers, then it ain't real. So I want you to remember that the next time you make a point on something and you ain't got the numbers, I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna be like, that ain't real.
And as always, I'll be prepared.
Because you ain't got the numbers. Where the numbers at?
I think you're taking this the wrong way. I'll say it again. You said it. I've heard other people say this. All these people came over. Really? Show me the numbers. How many? What's the range of people? Where are they? You cannot continue to say that this thing happened and then you have no idea what the number of people are. It'd be one thing if you said there's a range of it. I've looked for those numbers. I just can't find them. And so I'm like, well, are these numbers real? Or is this a political construct to make people think that one side or the other is softer on immigration? And again, I'll say it again. The first thing the Biden administration, the first legislation that they came up with when Biden came in office was an immigration reform package. That was the very first thing. And it got shot down by Republicans primarily. It appeared because they wanted to run against it. So if we're going to talk about this, let's talk about it.
I will say this:
14 million. It became a game. It became a game too. When the Biden first got in there and they were dropping off immigrants and then they started dropping off immigrants in Martha's Vineyard. Then they started taking immigrants and dropping them off at Kamala Harris's house, and they were bringing these immigrants in and putting them in Texas, and they put them on planes and it was a game. It was all a game. And then when they got to when they started dropping them off in Chicago, and the Chicagoans were like, "Hey, you're taking away from our resources," and then the Chicagoans started speaking out on it, and then it was happening right during the DNC. And we were talking about it on this podcast, and everybody was like, "Oh, immigration's nothing. Immigration's nothing. Immigration's nothing." And now we are here still talking about immigration. This is why I feel like I'm immigrant fatigue, because we've been talking about this same immigration issue for a very long time, and it's coming down to the same root. They came here illegally, and by just a quick Google search, it said
that is not true, sir.
14 million undocumented.
But sir,
14 million undocumented.
But sir, that is not factually accurate. That is not true. When you're talking about people who are here so-called undocumented, some people use the term illegal. That is a political term, highly politically charged. That does not accurately describe the multiple natures and situations in which undocumented people were here. So for instance, look at what the Haitians in Springfield are dealing with right now. They are here legally. But if the Trump administration decides to revoke their temporary status, overnight they are here.
They just did revoke their status as of February 5th or something.
Well, March is coming up too. March 16th. Is that whenever the Somalians got to be gone out of Minnesota, or he's going to drop the bomb on them too? TikTok.
But Terry, all I'm saying is let's talk about it, right? So for instance, there are people who came here legally and were working their way to the system to become a U.S. citizen. If the federal government overnight decide to pull their temporary status, that does not mean they came here illegally, sir. It is just not accurate.
I agree with you, but whenever you let someone in your house and you say, okay, you can come over here on a temporary status, and then when you come over here on a temporary status, and then you are involved in multi-level of fraud and breaking the law, and then you have someone, and then you have someone who you know who you're dealing with in the Trump administration, you have to brace yourself for what you're going to get. Especially like whenever it's been overlooked for so long by whenever in 2019 they came to Tim Walz and said there's Somalian fraud going on, you need to look into it, and then he overlooked it until Nick Shirley busted him out in 2025, 2026. That's 6 years. That's billions of dollars, and then you give that kind of ammunition to Donald Trump. I ain't gonna say it. You give that kind of ammunition to Donald Trump and his administration, you're gonna get all that. And then you start going to you talk about Springfield. They're already setting that up because Springfield, Ohio, comes from John Legends and his wife's ties to the Clintons.
John Legend. Wow, you brought John Legend to this? Okay, listen, I'm not saying you're wrong, bro. I'm not saying
they're going to get them all out.
Okay.
Here's something I think is important. Here's something I think is important, and Nathan, you talked about this. Like the immigration is not anything new. This is a can that's been kicked down the road, and I think for Democrats, you had 2 terms of Obama. And Obama did try to do something with when he did his Dreamers Act, but that was in the second act of his after he had already lost both houses of Congress and he had no power. That's why he had to do the Dreamers thing the way that he did it versus kind of having it pushed through Congress. But one might say again, he burned a lot of his political capital in that first term. Not on immigration, not on these other things, but he chose to take up other issues, healthcare, gay marriage, a bunch of other things. He burned his political capital when the Democrats had control over all 3 chambers of Congress, the presidency, the House, and the Senate. They used their capital on those issues. And when the Republicans got control and they wanted to do something on immigration, they couldn't. So that was not you. So you have to say that was not a priority. One of the priorities for the Democrats, and I get it, Obama ran on healthcare. He had to do something on that, right? And so Democrats have had their opportunities to do it. If they win in the midterms and they get the House and the Senate again, we'll see what they do with immigration law and any reform that they might want to do when they have control again. They might not be able to get anything because Trump has, I don't know how that veto power and stuff like that works. I'm sure Trump would try to veto anything Democrats would do, but we'll see. The next time Democrats have an opportunity to control government, will this be a priority or will they be on to something else?
Well, the last time the Democrats, not to defend, but to just be accurate, the last time Democrats had control of government, they tried. Again, that was the first thing the Biden administration tried to do. It just gets forgotten in all the political talk. And you've made the point too, Kevin, I remember on the show. It just keeps forgotten. You got to remind people over and over of what actually happened in history. Because if not, it just gets washed away with all the internet stuff. And people forgot that was the very first thing they tried to do.
Yeah, but he didn't have the numbers. He didn't have the numbers in Congress that he needed to
but he still tried to do it. And that
I'm not saying that, trying is something, but I guess the point is that when you've had opportunities, and Biden didn't have a real opportunity because he didn't have the numbers.
Right.
You got to have the numbers to be able to do it. And the question is when you had the numbers, or when you have, whether that's Republicans or Democrats, when Republicans have had the numbers, they haven't really.
They got the numbers right now.
Tried to genuinely solve the issue. Their solution, I guess, is mass deportation.
They got the numbers. They said they could do it. That's what they're doing.
But that's a temporary solution. You're right. The Republicans have full control of all 3 branches if they wanted to, but they're too busy trying to pass the SAVE Act to make it more difficult for Americans to vote. They could push comprehensive immigration reform and get it passed right now. That could be Trump's legacy, but they're choosing to play it out in American streets. And so what that means is the next administration, this is not a crisis on the border. This is a crisis in DC. We need Democrats and Republicans to come together, just make amends. Again, I
agree with that.
I watched something on C-SPAN a couple years back and learned a whole lot. Republican congressman, one of the more conservative ones, he was speaking with on the Senate floor, and I watched it for about 90 minutes, and he broke down what he thought was all the loopholes. Then I went back and did my own investigation and found out the guy was telling the truth, and I got a better understanding of what's happening. They are right. Republicans are right. Democrats are right. Yes, there is a crisis, a huge crisis with our immigration policy. There are huge. I mean, there are issues with immigration that makes no sense whatsoever. But the only way to solve that is not with federal officers in the truth, in the streets. It's with Democrats and Republicans in suits going and doing their job and coming up with some kind of comprehensive legislation, and they can fix that overnight. I'd love to see that happen. Love to see it. So, Tarris isn't going to like this next topic because he said he has immigration fatigue. And that's a phrase that he's coined here on the show. But check this out. Another immigration topic, if you will. This happened at a Chicago high school. The young man on the left there, high school student, he's holding a sign that reads, "I love ICE." I'm not sure what was going on with that particular time of the school day, but you'll hear him and see him on the video. He's saying, hey, I support ICE, and that's his right. The gentleman on the right walks up to him, and things take a turn for the worse. Check this out, then I've got questions for you.
Punch me?
Yes.
And you're going to get in trouble for that.
Okay.
Punch me?
Yes.
And you're going to get in trouble for that.
Okay.
Whoa. We support ICE and law enforcement. I support ICE.
That's crazy, bro.
I don't know what's crazy about this.
Yeah, I'm going to punch you.
You're going to punch me?
Yes.
And you're going to get in trouble for that.
Okay.
Whoa. Chill out, bro. I stand for my beliefs. I'm going to peacefully stand here and support my beliefs. I support ICE and law enforcement.
Peacefully fuck yourself.
Whoa. That's against school code. No swearing in the school.
So you see what happened there. You have the young man who was, a lot of people say he was assaulted. Looks like a straight up assault to me. But here's my question for you. Is this about free speech being punished or just a case of school violence, period? What do you think?
I would say free speech being punished, because I don't think this is a random case of school violence. Like if it was a fight that broke out, over people capping on each other in the lunchroom or whatever, you might be able to drop that. But this was clearly precipitated by the fact that this student had the ICE sign. And I'm actually quite surprised that the school even allowed that, because that's one of these things that's going to set off something like that. Like I think that most schools would probably have some kind of policy or something in place where you couldn't do that, where you couldn't bring a sign like that into the school or whatever. Because, even though you have the right to free speech, we know educational institutions like schools and whatnot are able to manage that all the time through their policies and so forth and so on. And so I think that's where the failure was, where the failure began in this case. But I think for that student who, one, it wasn't much of a punch because dude just kept right on talking afterwards. I mean, I'm like, that didn't even look like he was trying to, if he was trying to inflict too much damage, it was a weak punch. But I think that, you can't, no matter what the guy says, if you disagree with it, like you just can't go around assaulting people because they're carrying signs or saying things that, that you don't agree with. And I think that's not the message, that we want to be teaching our kids, that, because if he had a sign that said, ICE out, and somebody came up and punched him in the gut or in the face, there would be outrage on the other side. So, there's no place for that kind of thing. And I think it definitely was one of those situations where that student just didn't like what the guy was saying about his support for ICE, and he wanted to act on it. And he did. And hopefully the school dealt with it accordingly.
Your thoughts, guys? What do you think? Is the school to blame here?
Nothing, man. That kids being kids. And then, like Kevin said, that I think Goonie 2 times hit that one dude at the Cincinnati Brawl harder, and that dude got hit in that little video. So I mean, it's
What you call it?
I said Goonie 2 times hit that dude in the brawl down there downtown harder than that dude got hit in that video. That was weak, man. That was some bad. That's the worst acting I think we've seen in a long time, man. But on the other side of it, that dude, you never know what he had going on at home. He might be affected by ICE at home to the point to where, you know, it's affecting him to where it could emotionally charge him. He emotionally raged, you know, so that could be a thing too. But it looked staged. It looked Jesse Smollett to me.
Really? You think it was staged? Jesse Smollett. That's interesting. I didn't think about that. Maybe you're right. I don't know. Phil, what's your thoughts on that?
I don't think it has anything to do with free speech. The guy threw a punch without, you know, the other guy hitting him first. The guy ought to be disciplined for it. I don't think it has anything to do with speech.
You think the school was wrong to even allow those kind of like public displays of opinion and free speech? Just realizing how charged the moment is right now.
I'm sorry, allow the guy to hold up the ICE poster, you mean? Do we even know if the school had allowed it or whether he just walked in with it?
That's a good question.
Well, it looked like I don't know. To me, it looks like they were standing right by the front door where the security guard was. I mean, it seemed like the dude, I guess I'm assuming the guy in the yellow vest was a security guard. Took him a minute to get out there. But, you know, again, it seemed like the kid had been standing in the hallway. I don't know. I'm surmising from the look of it that it didn't seem like the kid just broke out the sign and then automatically the dude hit him. It seemed like he had been standing there for at least a minute. And I think that clearly in that kind of situation in a school building, this is where I disagree with Phil about the free speech, because but for the sign, I don't think there would have been a fight. Like the mere fact that this kid was holding the sign that said, "I love ICE," right? Which he would argue, hey, I'm just exercising my free speech. And this dude rolls up on me and punches me. So it's not like an infringement, quote unquote, on free speech. But what I would say is that but for that sign and but for his expression, I don't think there would have been a fight. I think that's undeniable. I mean, even the conversation back and forth between the two before the kid pulled the punch showed that it was clearly because of the messaging on the kid's sign that what precipitated the fight. So it wasn't just a random act of school violence. It got set off by the sign that the kid had.
And isn't free speech like free speech from the government? It doesn't mean you have free speech in school. Like, do students have free speech in school?
No,
Right.
You don't. And yes, you're right, Nathan. Free speech is sort of like infringement upon your ability to express your message by the government,
right?
To punish it. So some of the things that Trump is doing is very much an infringement upon free speech, like what he's doing with the networks and some of the newspapers and stuff like that. He's actually trying to quell free speech in that. But like, schools have rules about certain things. You can't cuss in school without getting punished for it. You could say, oh, that's my free speech, that's my right to cuss, but you probably go, well, I don't know, these days these kids cuss a lot in school and it doesn't seem like they get a lot of punishment for it. But yeah, I mean, they modified, schools used to tell you couldn't wear certain types of t-shirts. Like if you had a marijuana leaf on your shirt or if you had an objectionable message on your shirt, schools would tell you all the time that you couldn't wear that. And I remember when I was in high school, we tried that free speech argument, about that, and it didn't work.
Not one bit.
If you wore it, they made you turn it inside out or take it off, and if you refused, you was going home. So yeah, you don't have free speech like that in school.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. People get that confused all the time. I exercise my free speech. That's against the government, not against like private property or your employer or at a school. So totally different thing. All right, let's move on here. A lot of folks might remember a situation that happened here in Cincinnati on the Roebling Bridge. You had a bunch of demonstrators and it seemed like things got things got physical. I put it that way. Things got real physical. Well, court dates have now come up, and at least one individual has now been found guilty of failure to disperse. Jury found Suzanne Bratt, one of 15 people arrested by Covington police. They found her guilty of failing to disperse, which is a misdemeanor. Failing to disperse. Quotes say basically like, look, you don't have a right. You got a right to protest, but you don't have a right not to listen to lawful orders given to you by police. Quote, it does not give you the right to block traffic. And so my question is, does enforcing failure to disperse laws protect public safety or suppress activism?
It depends on where you are, and this is a clear indication. It depends on where you are, because if you're not mistaken, whenever they were protesting over in Cincinnati, and I don't know who suggested that they do this, but they tried to come over to Kentucky, and as soon as Kentucky got wind of it, Kentucky they met them. You know how Kentucky owns the river, right? So whenever you're coming across that bridge, once you come across and you leave that shore of Ohio, that is Kentucky territory. When you're coming over there, if you don't know that, you know it now. Kentucky owns the rights to the river up to the shores of Ohio when it comes to just jurisdiction policing. So when the police gave them that lawful order to, when they were coming over the bridge, I don't know why they would think to do that. I think it was a test to see exactly. But so when they were met with resistance and they got into that squabble on the bridge, that was a clear indication of what is to be expected, what goes on in Cincinnati, and what protests might go in Cincinnati, and how far you might be able to push the envelope in Cincinnati. We've seen that during the Breonna Taylor and the 2020 elections. In 2020 will not fly across the bridge in Kentucky. It's just two different things. So freedom to protest versus blocking traffic, it depends on where you're at, because in Ohio, they let them do it. They were in front of a car, pushing a car. They were protesting. They're in front of a car. So they got away with a whole lot. But as soon as they hit that bridge, they were met with resistance. A lot of people, no matter what side you're on, it got handled from a Kentuckian standpoint. Well done, Covington. Well done. And from an activist standpoint, you guys came over here, you got yours off, and only one person out of all 15 got charged. And probably some of you guys are going to get a payday after it. But from my perspective as a Kentuckian, they let them know straight up. Depends on where you're at.
So I think Tarris got a little bit wrong, and here's what I'll say. It's not a matter of where you are. The key word is lawful. So if I am protesting lawfully, which in the case of the Roebling Bridge, if you remember, those people were not, because they did not have a permit and they were on the bridge blocking traffic, presenting a safety threat. So they were unlawful in their protest. On the Cincinnati side of the river, they were not, because they had gone through the proper channels to make sure that they could be where they were at. And if you remember, there was a lot of heat being put on the organizers of that protest for leading people into a situation and not giving them all of the facts about what they could and could not do. If we remember how that unfolded in the aftermath. So there were a lot of people who were pissed at the organizers, like, hey, y'all let us into this. And so lawful is the key word. So police should not be giving lawful orders to disperse in a protest if my protest is lawful and peaceful, right? If my protest is unlawful and is not peaceful, and police give a lawful order to disperse, and I don't do that, then you know what's coming. You know the pellets is coming, the tear gas, the pepper spray, and maybe even the baton. I mean, that's just the way that that's the history. You know that's what's coming when stuff gets out of hand, whether that's doing property damage to buildings, or getting, again, Understand what I'm saying? Lawful, peaceful protests. There should be no quote unquote lawful order to disperse, because why am I dispersing? I'm using my First Amendment right to protest. I'm not breaking any laws, so leave me alone. But if I'm breaking laws, if I'm doing property damage, if I'm places that I don't have the legal right to be or haven't got clearance, then yes, if I'm given a lawful order to disperse, I need to heed that. Otherwise, you know what's coming.
And let me, and I'm going to give you another anecdotal thing that is logical. Why placement of these things happen? Because I believe that if it was the KKK that showed up in Lincoln Heights on the bridge in Lincoln Heights, if they would have showed up in Covington, Covington would have put it on their heads. Where Ohio is a little bit more lenient in their stance on those kind of issues, I'm happy to know that I live in a commonwealth and a county, surrounding county, that I know that even no matter if it was the protesters from the whatever protest they were doing in Cincinnati, or if it would have been the KKK who came to Roebling Bridge and set up shop there at Roebling Bridge, they would have been met with the same force, is what I'm saying. So it matters of where you're at.
Yeah, but it shouldn't. It shouldn't in that regard. I mean, look, I think any objective person who looked at how Covington police responded in that situation, they were over the top. I'm not saying that protesters were right by being where they shouldn't have been, but the response that they received from Covington police was excessive. It was over the top. And I don't care, even with the orders to disperse, there were still less violent means by which they could have handled that crowd and got them out of the way. Like, they came in with an agenda and they were on those people. Like, as soon as they gave the order, and it didn't happen immediately, they were on some of these people, punching, kicking, throwing them to the ground. And I think one of the main officers that he got some discipline behind that. So clearly there was an overreaction. I'm not saying that the police were wrong to try to disperse the crowd, but the extent to which they did it and how quickly they did it showed that they came in with a cracking heads mentality, which was over the top. So I'm not going to say that they weren't right to try to disperse the crowd based on what we know the law to be, but how they did it was definitely excessive and over the top.
And I agree with you, Kevin. I agree with you. If you have those type of sentiments, but someone who lives on this side, I don't think that it was over the top at all. I thought they were met with the type of aggression that someone who believes like me feels proud to know that our city, the buck stops when you're coming across that Ohio River with
but that. Police are supposed to eat. They're supposed to meet. There's a such thing as proportional use of force, right? You meet the other side with the force that they bring to the table. Now, people had come with police and they was pushing police and they was shoving them and throwing stuff at police. Then police they're going to defend themselves however they need to go down. But that wasn't the type of force that they met people with, that the people who were on that bridge met law enforcement with. And it was disproportionate. And whether you don't support what they were doing or not, Tarris, I don't think any of us can be in it. Like, this is what's dangerous about what Trump is doing with ICE and the problems that we have with some law enforcement. Like, that's not okay. It's not okay to meet people with disproportionate use of force. I don't care whether you agree with the issue or where they are or what's going on. If you want to turn them back, fine. There were plenty of less escalatory ways that they could have gotten those folks off the bridge without beating up on women, and a lot of the other things that we saw go down. I can't.
But whenever they are in front of cars, right around the roundabout in Cincinnati, in front of the sign, right about Great American Ballpark, roundabout where you're coming over to the Roebling Bridge, and they are blocking traffic, standing in front of cars right before you come over to Kentucky, and you don't think that these police officers are in contact with the Covington PD saying, hey, this is what we got going on over here. They're blocking traffic. We know this is a very busy highway, a very busy influx to your city, a main vein lane to your city, and they're coming your way. They're already blocking cars over here. We're handling it. We're mitigating it in a very peaceful, very cool atmosphere. and Kentucky gets word of it and they decide to handle it a different way, after they are impeding, y'all, you're talking about some peaceful protesting, and we're talking about unlawful, unpermitted people walking in to try to stop traffic. They're putting themselves in harm's way, along with the people who are driving on the bridge too. I think the police handled that in Kentucky just like they should have. That's my opinion.
I get it's your opinion, Tarris, but I just don't believe that. And again, from what I can remember from that incident, and my opinion might be off, somebody in the chat or Nathan, you can correct me if I'm mistaken, but marching across the bridge, even if you're blocking traffic, is not the same thing as committing violence or something that would require the type of response. Like, you would have thought these people, like these protesters, was like beating on folks and all they had to do. All Covington police had to do was create a blockade, a barrier that stopped traffic from coming. Look, they could have rerouted traffic to different, if that was a concern, they could have rerouted traffic to other places until they got the situation under hand. Police do it all the time. But this is what I'm saying. Covington police didn't want to do that. There were a lot of different ways that they could have handled it better. Like I said, they came in with a crackhead's mentality, and you saw that that's what they got. And I'm never going to say that that's okay, because what those protesters was doing did not require the type of force that police met them with. And so the next thing that you're going to be saying, okay, well, if you jaywalking, the police got the right to jump out the car and beat you down because you presenting a problem. No, man, that's ridiculous. Right. It's got to be.
I made the point. Yeah, I mean, just because you've committed a crime does not mean that law enforcement can just do anything to you. I don't think that means that anybody's safe. To Kevin's point, hey, so you jaywalk, that means I can, tackle you to the ground and spray you with mace. You're jaywalking. I wasn't there, but from when I watched the video, the impression that I got is I felt like it was heavy-handed, but I wasn't there. I don't know if somebody threw a bottle or I just don't recall. But from the video, if police can take a softer approach and get the same result, maybe it takes a little bit longer. I would prefer that. Now, listen, I'm with you, Tarris. I want police officers that's ready to get busy when it's time to get busy with people that come to get busy. But I don't think that those protesters came to get busy. They might have been a little bit obnoxious. They might have been slowing up traffic. They might have been an irritant. Well, they're just protesting, and maybe, they could have took a different approach. But again, I'm not covered in police.
The protesters are going to take a different approach next time they try to come over in Kentucky soil. I guarantee you that.
Yeah, they might. But I'm just saying.
That's why I'm happy that they did what they did. And no matter what goes on forward, because I know there's been lawsuits and HR and ethics and all these things that go on after all that this stuff happens, and this misdemeanor that this girl, it probably could have got dropped, but I'm sure she wants to go down in history as a martyr and say, oh yeah, probably go tell her great grandkids when I got my ovals on the bridge, it's on document. You know what I'm saying? Because they had enough attorneys to get this thing dropped. It could have been gone.
Hey, Tarris, let me ask you this. Do you know what happened? Do you know what happened on the Edmund Pettus Bridge?
On the Edmund Pettus Bridge. The Edmund Pettus Bridge, is that civil rights?
Yep. You know what happened on the Edmund Pettus Bridge?
Okay, and
Answer my question.
Tell me what happened. Tell me what happened on the Edmund. How can we compare this? How can we compare this, what happened to civil rights, to what's happening with illegal, what they did? They broke the law. How are we going to? Wow, black people we are not the sponge for everything that goes on. We can't go back to civil rights and say, remember what happened.
I'm just saying that the same force that you're applauding Covington for doing, that those civil rights marchers were met with the same type of response and somewhat worse in that situation. So John Lewis would say, hey, that's good trouble. And when you got people who are marching, again, we've talked on this program extensively about deportation. And if I remember, this was about that imam who was being detained in the jail. Like, that was kind of what sparked it, and maybe a few of the other incidents. I mean, for many people, that's a human rights issue. And so the same force that you're applauding with Covington was the same force your forefathers and mothers was met with when they went across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. So if you think what Covington police did was good, then I guess you think what Bull Connor and all of them folks did back in good old Selma, Alabama was good too.
Man,
you don't. You don't. I know you don't.
We shall overcome mentality. We've got to get past that. We are. I mean, because
somebody. Hey, Tarris, it ain't about the we shall overcome mentality. But if you know, it's one thing I do on this show. I'm gonna make sure you consistent. So you can't be like, because you like civil rights and it benefited you and your people, that you have a problem with what they did, but because you have an issue with immigration, you're okay with cops busting heads. That ain't consistent, bruh. That's the type of hypocrisy that I talk about on this show. Repeat.
That's fair.
And I'm gonna hold your feet to the fire.
You know what, Kevin? I like the way you did that. That's very, very fair. You can hold me to the fire on that one. That's fair. I don't think it's a fair comparison, because I will go and say I'm tired of black people being the bearer.
So what's the difference? What's the difference? Those civil rights, human rights. You're marching for.
Because they cosplayed it. They weren't doing that for civil rights. They came on. They like, this worked for civil rights, so we're going to try it for every single thing after civil rights. Why
we reinvent the wheel?
Because it don't got the same sting when it ain't black people. You know, when black people beating up on the bridge in Covington, it was white people trying to cosplay black people.
There were some black people who were there.
It wasn't as many. It wasn't as many. So that's what I'm saying. We like to go.
I'm gonna pull out what Nathan did. What number was it, Tarris? You don't know what number it was. Where the numbers at, bro? You can't tell me that there wasn't black people there.
What's the number? You don't have the answer, Sway.
You got a good point, though, Kevin. I like the way you. That's a good point. It's a great.
Oh man! All right, guys. I appreciate you. I really do. To the audience, to Phil, to Laketa. Laketa is scheduled to be back with us on Friday. We got Alandis and a couple other surprises as well for Friday.
I want to be back on with Alandis, man. I miss her.
Do you really want to be back on with Alandis? I mean,
yeah,
because
I do. I mean, she don't like me. I don't care.
She don't. I can't speak for her, but I don't think she dislikes you at all.
Right.
She don't strike me as that kind of person.
Let me paraphrase that. She doesn't agree with me, and she likes to give me a whole lot of pushback, and I appreciate that, because that makes me sharper. I mean, it does. It just makes me sharper.
What you got going on Friday? Then we'll be here Friday, 1 p.m.
I do a mentorship. Oh, see, because I don't do it, because this is a great introduction, because Alana said, she said, you don't do anything for the community. I think that was where I can go back and I can find it. It wasn't that I don't do anything. I don't do much for my community. I don't do much for my community. But I do. And I said, you know what? I'm not even going to respond to that, because I don't think I do. I work hard enough. So I can't be on Fridays, because I go to Dayton, Lincoln Elementary, and there's some 5th and 6th graders that we were reading a book, Chop Wood and Carry Water. We're reading to a group of 30. And then I got to tell this cool story and I'll get off here. A group of kids that I mentor. I'm not a good reader up in front of people. So in front of these 30 people, I said, okay, I'm not a good reader, but I'm going to be vulnerable, and I'm going to read a chapter of this book. So I read this chapter of this book, and I stumbled over my words. But afterwards, the next week, there's 2 kids who are in my program. They volunteered to read in this program out loud in front of 30 other people. So those are the impacts that I feel like, spark the heart and the things. That's why I can't be here on Fridays, because I'm actually in a mentorship program with 30 young 5th and 6th graders that we're teaching them things like how to put on deodorant and the importance of just showing up and being accountable and, reading in front of people, because everybody knows how hard it is to read in front of a group of people in 5th and 6th grade. You're stumbling over your words. Your people are making fun of you. So these are the things. That's why I can't be with you guys on Hot Mic on Fridays, but I'm there.
Respect it. Well, we'll be here Friday at 1 p.m., 1:15 p.m. Thank you for being here to everybody. Really appreciate you. Have a great Tuesday, and stay healthy.